I want to cover the pattern or the experience that some women have after they leave a narcissistic marriage or an unfulfilling relationship and they're co-parenting. And it's the idea of feeling like the inadequate parent, feeling like the loser parent. I've worked with clients before who felt like their ex was the golden child and their ex had moved on quickly or even had left them for somebody else and was still married or in the relationship with the new person and really struggled with the connection with her child as they adjusted to the divorce and to co-parenting and visitation and to the new person and her kids if she had kids. And so somebody wrote in recently, a member of my audience, and I want to share, I'm not going to share word for word her struggle at the moment, but I want to read it to you and then address some of the things that she shares in with the intention that you might take away something that you're missing that could lead you to healing, not just this challenge, if you feel challenged with your co-parenting relationship with your ex, but uncovering, unlocking your biggest potential. I was listening to a friend sent me something on why narcissists choose women. And there's a big misconception that narcissistic types choose partners who are weak or who are vulnerable. And while, yes, that can happen, for the most part, however, they choose women who are very strong and who are very driven and conscientious and who have a dream and who stand for something. So, with that said, let me read this person's challenge. She says, currently, I'm struggling with feeling inadequate as the mom of a teenage daughter. My ex got married in May, and my daughter is now having to adjust to the new person and her kids. And to top that off, her ex and his new family moved over an hour away. And so they're co-parenting with 1 week off and 1 week at home with mom. And she says that I feel like I get the brunt of her emotions as a teenager, plus all of the changes for her, just the changes of being a teenager, right? And the lingering grief and anger that she still has from the divorce and her dad's narcissistic abuse. It's a lot for me to receive when she comes back. And I don't feel like I have the good times and the memories with my daughter like we used to have. I do feel like I'm struggling with jealousy, and there's another family that's taking up my daughter's attention. I also feel a bit lonely when she's gone. There are a few things that I want to speak to. The first thing that she talks about is the feeling of inadequacy. Now, this is probably going to rub some people the wrong way. When we talk about the feeling of inadequacy, it's usually tied to a core belief that I'm not enough. There's something about me that is not enough for a good relationship, not enough as a mom, not enough as a friend, not enough as a coworker or a business owner or an employee or a leader in my role. So I want to talk about this because this is the thing that she leads her challenge with. I'm struggling with feeling inadequate. When you feel inadequate, it has almost nothing to do with other people and what they're doing, including your ex. This does not excuse abuse. It does not make right what your ex did wrong. It's not blaming you in any way. The point that I want to make here is that if you feel inadequate now, the likelihood that you felt inadequate long before you met your ex on some level, conscious or unconscious, was there. So the underlying primary common denominator in that is I feel inadequate. And the first step in making change, especially if you have left a toxic or a narcissistic marriage or relationship, the beauty, the upside of a narcissistic relationship is that very often it is a prime opening, a portal for healing all of the things that you've been carrying for most of your adult life and turning that into the best version of you, the best career, the best types of relationships. It's a catalyst for healing the stuff that you have been running from. So the first point that I want to make is that the feeling of inadequacy isn't really about what they're doing or how somebody's acting. How, if you have a child who's coming home, and yes, I understand it's extremely challenging, it's extremely difficult to deal with those emotions. Their actions towards you, their behavior towards you is simply a mirror that's that's triggering the feelings of inadequacy that you already have. They're just bringing it up, poking your buttons so that that inadequacy can rise to the surface so that you have an opportunity to handle it effectively, get curious about it, learn how to embrace those uncomfortable feelings, and learn how to reframe the meaning that you're giving those experiences. So I'll give you an example. I had a teacher who used something called the gingerbread model. If you've ever made a gingerbread cookie or gingerbread house, gingerbread man, let's stick with gingerbread man. You know that you get a blank cookie that looks like a little gingerbread man, and then you decorate it. So the idea is that this gingerbread man or person is us when we come into this world. And as we go through life, we accumulate scars. We accumulate like like a bow tie, an icing bow tie. That's the you got to be perfect that we learned from our mom or our dad or whatever. You got to be a good girls get good grades, right? That's another mark that goes on. You had your first heartbreak when you were in junior high. That's another mark that goes on. You learned that your parents were emotionally unavailable for you. That's another mark that goes in. So the idea is that we accumulate a lot of these experiences in childhood and early adult life, and they go in and kind of decorate our gingerbread man. And as you go through life, it doesn't matter what you do, what degrees you have, what job titles you have, what kind of accolades you have, where you live in the world, where you live in the country, who you date, what kind of car you drive, how much money you have in the bank account. Life is always going to present you with experiences that bring up your stuff. So if you learned early in life and took on the meaning that you weren't enough in some way, that's a mark on your gingerbread man, right? That's a mark that's gone in. And what will happen is if you don't reconcile that, you will find that you attract relationships and people into your life and career scenarios into your life that chronically, at some point, it's inevitable. You feel not enough. Now, the natural tendency is to look at the other person that's triggering that feeling in you and blame them, make them the bad person, make them wrong, make them, this person's acting this way and therefore I feel this way. That's natural, right? We all do that. But the thing that I want you to realize is that that other person is just a mirror that is reflecting back stuff that you already have that has nothing to do with them. You had that long before they came on the scene, and they are just simply there in your life to help you to bring that stuff up so that you have the opportunity to heal it. And what holds people back more than anything, especially after leaving an unfulfilling marriage or relationship, is living in a state of victimhood. They feel victimized by their ex. Still, they feel victimized by his behavior. You're a victim to your circumstances creates more feelings of inadequacy. And when you feel inadequate, what you really are telling yourself subconsciously is that I'm not enough. And if you don't feel enough, that is going to present in every area of your life. You are probably going to stay in a career that isn't aligned for you anymore, or tolerate things in your career that you don't like because you feel like you don't have a choice. Or you might, instead of tolerating things, you might find that you are a workhorse in your career and you're always taking on extra stuff. You might have a fear of delegating because you don't want to be a burden. And all of that stems from a subconscious belief, I'm not enough. I'm afraid of burdening or imposing on other people. I'm not enough. Like, it's too much for me to do that. I don't want to make people feel bad is another variation of that. So you might also compensate in your career, going back to the workhorse analogy. If you don't feel enough, I see this a lot with women who have experienced unhealthy relationships. They also kind of they have the same pattern in their careers where they don't set boundaries, or they don't know how, or they feel guilty about setting boundaries. They don't act on it. And that all goes back to that feeling of inadequacy. And if you feel like you're not enough, what you are more prone to do is to ignore your intuition. A lot of people write in and they say, how do I know if I can trust another person again after my ex? I feel like I can't trust men without judging them or without fearing, is this person going to screw me over too? We start to develop this armor that blocks us from trusting other people. And the thing that I really want to drive home is that it's not about trusting other people. It is about trusting yourself. And if you don't trust yourself, your intuition is always speaking, your inner voice is always communicating to you. But if you've tolerated unhealthy relationships because you didn't know any better, that's who you were at the time when you were in them, your connection to your intuition is fuzzy, if not lost at best. When you also subconsciously don't feel good enough, you are going to be more likely to ignore your intuition that is telling you to start the business, or telling you to leave that draining career, or telling you to get back out there and date again. You want a great relationship, but you're too scared to put yourself on a dating app, or you're too scared. So there's all these things that come up. We set roadblocks in front of ourselves. So how do you reconcile? How do you get over this feeling of inadequacy? The first thing that I want to remind you again is that it doesn't have anything to do with other people. Your transformation, especially if you've had a history of unfulfilling relationships that leave you feeling drained, that change is an inside job. What do I mean by that? You first have to learn to regulate your emotions. When I say regulate your emotions, it means to stop living in a state of fight or flight. What happens when, as this woman wrote in, when we get sucked into our circumstances, when we react to other people's behavior or their actions, we're in a reactive state. And if you have been in a narcissistic relationship, it's quite likely that your nervous system is stuck in a reactive state, meaning you're constantly anxious. You don't trust yourself or your judgment. You feel like you never have enough time. You're met with anxiety. The moment you wake up in the morning, you might be met with anxiety at 3 a.m. in the morning when you jolt awake and you've got all these things that are on your mind. You feel like you're just existing, or you're stuck in survival mode. So the first thing is learning how to release and overcome that patterned programming in your brain and your body. I don't recommend talking about the story of what your ex is doing over and over again with a friend or a therapist or a coach. I recommend using trauma-informed methods like somatic experiencing, breath work, guided meditation, mindfulness, somatic experiencing with a practitioner or a coach who's trained in this to help you unlock some of the patterns and the feelings and help you develop a greater tolerance or capacity to be with your feelings as they are. As women who get into unfulfilling relationships, we develop a skill that helps us survive those relationships, but that does damage in our life long after we leave. And that pattern, that skill that we learn, is avoidance. We deny our feelings. We deny that things are really that bad. We minimize circumstances. We tell ourselves it's better to just stick with what I have right now than try to do something differently. So, increasing your capacity for feelings is getting out of fight or flight mode, retraining your brain and your body to stop living in fight or flight. That's the first step. When you regulate your own emotions, when you start learning how to process, I call it riding the wave of uncomfortable feelings and allow yourself to accept, embrace, befriend your feelings, you naturally arrive at a place where you're calmer. You have more clarity mentally and emotionally. You're not victimized by your own feelings. You don't feel victimized by other people. And what happens is that the relationships that are triggering you the most start to shift. This is not an overnight process. It takes commitment. It takes daily practice, multiple touch points during the day. And it often takes working with somebody that is going to be able to see your own blind spots better than you can see them. So that's the first step of getting out of that inadequate state. Once you have more clarity mentally and emotionally, then you can start identifying what are the beliefs that I've taken on that have led me to the circumstances I'm in my life. And then once you have that clarity of those limiting beliefs, you can start reprogramming them through subconscious retraining and through taking aligned action in your life. Aligned action that I work with my clients on is risk taking, not big major risks, but learning how to take risks like setting boundaries, asking for a raise, asking for more money in your business, going on a date, taking yourself on date. Finally, stop procrastinating and like you've been dreaming of going back to school and getting your MBA. You do that. I had a client one time who had been dreaming of going to Africa. She wanted to go on a safari, but she didn't have anybody to go with. And finally, after a couple of months of working together, she was like, screw it, I'm just going to go. She had the most amazing time and she went by herself. Whereas before, she had this belief that if I go by myself, people are going to feel sorry for me. They're going to look at me and think that like, wow, this poor woman. So the second phase is starting to take risks that put you outside of your comfort zone in multiple areas of your life. And when you do this, you automatically build confidence, you automatically build trust in yourself. And the final phase of this is bringing that risk taking to relationships that trigger you the most. That might be your closest friends or family and dating. But once you have the first two phases under your belt, you have learned how to regulate your emotions. You started the retraining process between your brain and your body. You've identified these limiting beliefs, and then started to show up differently in other parts of your life. Your career is more aligned because you're now pursuing work that lights you up. You are overcoming your limiting beliefs around money and what abundance and how much money you're giving yourself permission to create and circulate in your life. You are setting boundaries with draining friends. One of the byproducts of doing this work, unfortunately, is that you start to feel a little bit more alone at times because as you evolve, relationships that you once entertained as the former version of you naturally start to fall away because they're no longer aligned. And I have some clients who have feared being alone. And this process of realignment comes with some discomfort and comes with this idea of like, I have to trust this process. I have to trust myself. So once you have the emotional regulation and a strong, clear, open channel where you allow yourself to experience all spectrums of emotions. And then you're making choices in your life that are more aligned with what you want and not what others expect of you. Then you have a much stronger foundation to enter the arena of dating and attracting a healthy partnership. And I will say that dating is not easy. It's not easy when you've been burned. It's not easy, and it's going to challenge your edges. It's going to challenge you to trust yourself. It's going to challenge you to speak up. And it's meant to do that. And when you have the proper inner foundation, dating isn't something to dread. It's something that accelerates your healing. So if you've been feeling inadequate about being the loser parent, to recap, the first thing to realize is that your feelings of inadequacy have very little to do, if anything to do, with your current circumstances. The current circumstances that you find yourself in, where you are seeing your ex move on faster than you, where you are watching your child or your children having to adjust and they're reactive to you when they get home, and maybe you worry that your ex's house is like the perfect family, or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you're worrying that your child is getting the brunt of their emotions, and then they have to come back to you and you feel inadequate. And then you feel bad that you feel inadequate because, now they have kind of two, empty parents here. And like, what does that mean? So the first thing is really taking ownership that you are the common denominator in your relationships, and that if you are the common denominator and it's created problems, then you have the power to shift that. If you are the problem, you are also the solution, the law of polarity or the law of opposites. Maybe it's polarity. I think it's polarity. So you have the power to shift this. You have the power to turn things around. The problem is that most people remain victim to their circumstances, or they remain victim to the inner voice in their mind that says, I can't do it. It's too hard. And that voice is what kept you for many, many years, probably long past the expiration date, probably what encouraged you to walk down the aisle. I think the majority of people that I've spoken with and worked with in the past admitted that they knew walking down the aisle was a mistake, and yet they did it anyway. So the point that I want you to remember from this is that feeling inadequate, overcoming that is an inside job that doesn't require anybody else or anything else in your life to change initially. When we feel inadequate, we want to rearrange circumstances in our life while we still feel inadequate. And what that does is you might get a better career. You might date somebody who's a little nicer, but it will always result in you feeling inadequate in some way because you haven't yet dealt with the beliefs that you have that are co-creating those scenarios. So if this resonated for you and you would like to learn more, I invite you to book a free breakthrough session. Go to bethanydotson.com/talk. We'll have an honest conversation. This is for somebody who feels like she's done everything right since leaving. You've probably been a rule follower and I'm going to do right by the book type of person your whole life. You have had counseling, you have read self-help, you've learned all about narcissistic behavior, but you still don't feel good. You still feel stuck. You still feel like a victim of circumstance. You know that you are capable of so much more in your life. You want a peaceful home. You want more alignment in your career. You want to attract a healthy relationship. You already see that vision, but you don't know how to get there. If that's you, then book a breakthrough session and we will have a no pressure, no obligation. This is not like a hard used car salesman conversation. This is just taking the next step to explore if it's an aligned fit to potentially work together. So that is at bethanydotson.com/talk. If you would like to watch the masterclass, which is a more in-depth training where I cover the 5 internal shifts you need to master, or at least practice on a regular basis. We're always going to be on the journey of mastery, right? You can learn those 5 internal shifts to stop feeling inadequate, to stop distrusting yourself, and how to start trusting your intuition again, hearing your intuition again, learning how to attract better relationships, learning how to improve the relationships that you have in your life, including the one with your ex. You can watch that masterclass at bethanydotson.com/replay. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Take care.